These are real 911 calls, disturbing, mysterious, and true. Each story will send chills down your spine and slowly drift you into sleep. This story is completely free. We don't put any ads, which means we don't earn anything from these videos. All we ask is one small favor. Please subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. It's free for you, but it gives us the motivation to keep making more real police stories every night. Also, tell us in the comments which city are you watching from and what time is it right now. We love reading your messages. Now, let's begin the story. Story number 1. I'm a patrol officer in a Midwestern town where the county roads cut long and straight through fields, and a porch light can be the only star at ground level for a mile. It was late fall, dry leaves scudding in gutters, air cold enough to see my breath when I stepped out of the car. My shift had been a dull stretch of alarms and false starts until our 911 center lit up a welfare check. Repeated open line calls from a landline, no voice on the other end, just room noise. The address was a farmhouse on County Line Road, not far from the river. The call taker said the line had dialed 3 times within 20 minutes. Each time, no one spoke, but you could hear something. Not crying, not static either. A soft ticking, maybe a clock. Unit 12, copy, dispatch said. Open line, landline, no contact, request welfare check. 12 copies. En route, I said, thumb off the mic. I glanced at my partner's empty seat. He was on a transport, and turned onto the county road alone, tires whispering over cracked asphalt, cornfields like dark walls on either side. Info came over CAD as I drove. The subscriber name on the landline was an Edward H., age 79. No flags, no priors. The call note said the first callback rang, and rang with no answer. The second callback, the line picked up but stayed silent. On the third, the call taker thought she heard someone breathing. The property was listed as single family, no gate, backlot sloping to the river. I knew the place. White 2-story with a porch sagging into the weeds, a black water pump by the driveway that hadn't worked since I was a kid. Dispatch 12, I said. Can you try landline again while I'm en route? I'll be there in 5. They did. I listened to the empty road and the distant hum of my heater. A minute later, the dispatcher came back low and careful, the way they get when they think there's someone listening who won't answer. 12. Callback picked up. No voice. I can hear. A metronome? It's rhythmic. Hold on. She put the line on hold. I've heard enough 911 audio to know there's no such thing as silence. Even a quiet house has a sound, fridge motors, water in pipes, a dog collar jingling. This was something else. I couldn't hear it through the radio, just through the way dispatch went quiet. Every word measured. It put a tightness in my shoulders I know better than to ignore. By the time I turned onto County Line, the sky had that moonlight that makes frost look like it might move. I killed my high beams a quarter-mile out, rolled dark the rest of the way. The house sat in its little clearing, skeletal orchard behind it, the porch light off. I parked with my nose toward the road, habit, and stepped out into air that had the taste of river in it. 12's on scene, I said. Show me out with that residence. The gravel under my boots was loud. The house looked abandoned from the driveway, no curtains, a mailbox with the numbers sun-faded. But that was just the way old houses look at night. I went to the front door, knocked. Sheriff's office, I called. Edward, it's the sheriff's office. You called 911. You okay? No answer. The wind ruffled the leaves piled against the steps. Somewhere an owl made that hollow sound that always seems further away than it is. I knocked again, harder. The door moved under my knuckles, not latched, but when I pushed, it caught. Chain on. Dispatch 12, I said. No answer at the door. Door's chained. Can you check for any key holder? Negative 12. No key holders on file. We have the line again. It initiated a 4th call as you arrived. Still an open line. I can hear that ticking. It's faster now. Copy. I'm going to make contact with a neighbor and check the rear. Only one neighbor within easy walking distance. The Petersons 2 parcels up, but their house was dark, and you don't wake up an old farmer at midnight unless you have to. I walked the perimeter. The back steps were rickety, the kind that flex under your foot. The back door had a pane of glass broken out and taped over with plastic long gone brittle. I shined my light inside. Old wallpaper peeled like curled tongues. The kitchen was neat in that dated way. A table with a vinyl cloth, one chair pulled back like someone had just stood. No dishes in the sink. The phone was on the wall near the doorway to the hall, a beige rotary with its spiral cord tied in a knot around the hook. The line from the road used to come into a gray box on the back of the house. I found it with my light. The little door was hanging open. No padlock. The phone company's demarcation was clean, wires still intact, but oxidized green where they bent into the house. I put my hand on the cable, cold as anything else. No sense to it, but my skin prickled at the thought that something so quiet could be calling anybody. I was about to circle back to the front when the porch light came on. Not a snap, not the hum of a ballast warming up, just a steady bloom of yellow that I felt in my chest. I swung my beam around, then killed it, letting my eyes adjust. The light shone through the front windows, painting the porch boards. I hadn't heard a switch. Could have been a motion sensor, I told myself. Could have been a timer. Dispatch, porch light just came on, I said. Still no contact. I'm going to make entry. Advise if you get a voice. 12. Copy. Still open line. Still. Ticking. There are rules for making entry. We balance exigency with the Fourth Amendment. A 911 call open line, no contact plus a resident of that age, can be exigent if you can articulate a need to check for welfare. I articulated it, to myself and to the tape that records our radios. I went back to the front, popped the chain with a little pry bar we keep in the door pocket, and stepped inside with my light up and my name already in my mouth. Sheriff's office? Edward? It's the sheriff's office. Houses hold their own temperatures. This one held the cool of a basement. It smelled like a toolbox. The living room was arranged as if for company that never came doilies on the armrests. An Afghan folded with precision. My light drifted slow over picture frames, catching faces that looked at me because they'd been made to. There was a clock on the wall above the hallway entrance, an old pendulum that clicked with too much confidence. There it was, the tick dispatch had heard. Not a metronome, a quiet clock with a loud personality. Edward, I called again, softer now. You okay? No answer. The house answered me with the clock. I moved to the kitchen. The phone hung on its hook exactly as I'd seen through the back window. My light caught the plastic like a scale on a fish. I put 2 fingers to the handset, lifted. Dead. No dial tone, no hiss, just absence. I looked at my radio. A lot of us subconsciously do that when silence presses. I squeezed the shoulder mic. Dispatch, I'm inside. I've got a landline here that's dead. You still have the calling party on? 12. Affirmative. The line is still seized. I can patch you in if you want to try to speak to it. I hesitated. It's one thing to talk to a room over a radio. It's another to talk to a line that isn't there. Go ahead, I said. Patch me. I'll identify. There was a pop of carrier, and then the emptiest sound I've ever heard came through my radio speaker. Not static, not air, just convinced nothing. Underneath it, faint as the heartbeat you only notice when you lie down, the tick of a clock. I cleared my throat and spoke like I would to someone hiding behind a couch, trying not to scare them. Edward, this is Control 12 with the sheriff's office. I'm inside your home. If you can hear me, I need you to speak up. The tick filled the spaces my words left. Somewhere a pipe creaked. I held my breath to hear better, which is the opposite of how hearing works. The house waited. 12. I'm hearing what you're hearing, dispatch said, voice low. No voice yet. Every call has a moment where it decides what kind of call it's going to be. This one decided it would be a test of patience. I did a slow sweep hallway, bedroom, bath, sheets tucked, dust thick, toothbrush dry. In the back bedroom, a narrow bed under the window, and a dresser with 3 ties laid across it. I checked the closet. Nothing but the smell of cedar and old rain. As I turned, something thumped. Not violent. Just enough to make you think you imagined it. Downstairs, back toward the kitchen. I stepped to the hallway expecting raccoon in a cupboard or a branch against the house. The clock ticked as if it had been waiting for its cue. In the kitchen, the chair at the table had moved. Only an inch or two, The pattern in the vinyl floor slightly misaligned with the chair leg. I could have bumped it, I thought. Could have. But it takes no effort for your brain to decide it didn't. I put 2 fingers to the chair's back, nudged it, watched the leg find its old dent in the flooring. Places remember where weight goes. I turned my head toward the phone without meaning to. On the radio, the open line breathed. The tick had sped up. Pendulum clocks do that when someone bumps them. My mouth was dry. The heater in the living room kicked, a lazy fan. The porch light hummed. "Dispatch?" I said, not taking my eyes off the phone. "Go ahead and disconnect the patch and try the line again. I'm going to stand by." "Copy. Stand by." The patch clicked off. I watched the wall, phone like it might blink. The radio hissed and then... 12. New inbound from the same landline. We did not dial. Caller ID shows the residence. Open line. No voice. "Copy," I said, quieter than I meant to. I'm present at the phone. The handset is on the hook. The line at the box appears intact. I stepped close and put the back of my knuckles to the plastic, the way you touch something on a stove to see if it's hot. It was as warm as the room. I don't know what I was expecting, a vibration, a hum, but there was nothing. I tilted my head and realized I could hear the ticking through the radio and in the room at the same time, a fraction of a beat off, like 2 people whispering the same word out of sync. "Edward," I said, speaking to both the air and the idea of it. "If you're in here with me, I need you to say something." The refrigerator compressor kicked on just enough to prove me foolish. I let out a breath I hadn't meant to hold. It fogged faintly. The window over the sink showed black, my own light in the glass a circle around a smaller circle. It was then that dispatch said something I hadn't expected. 12. Be advised, I've got the subscriber's daughter on the admin line. She says the residence should be vacant. Her father passed 3 months ago. Service was supposed to be disconnected. She's not local, out of state. Can we confirm the house is secure? I looked at the chair. I looked at the tidy sink, and the phone on the wall, and the clock that would not stop. "Copy," I said. "House is secure. No signs of forced entry beyond my own. Confirm landline service shows active?" "Stand by," dispatch said, and I could hear her typing. Computer keys at midnight have a staccato you don't notice during the day. Telephone company says line should be inactive, but we are getting call data. This is unusual. I let my light drift to the demarc box outside through memory, the door hanging open, the copper bright where it shouldn't be. "I'll check the box again," I said, and stepped to the back door. My hand found the knob. It was colder than before, as if the metal had remembered winter while my back was turned. The yard lay still in the wash of the porch light. I crossed to the box and crouched. The same wires, the same neat screw terminals. I tapped the cable where it ran up into the siding. It didn't move. There was a tiny spider in the corner of the box, balled up like a fist. I closed the door to keep weather out of habit. When I stood, my radio buzzed. 12. The open line just changed. "I'm hearing your voice." "From a minute ago." Patching. Another click, and I heard myself. "Dispatch. Porch light just came on. Still no contact. I'm going to make entry. Advise if you get a voice." My words, not recorded, but live, like someone was playing me back with a delay that had nothing to do with technology we owned. I felt the hair on my arms lift under the uniform. I looked at the kitchen window. My reflection looked back. In the glass, I saw the clock behind me. Tick, 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 confident as ever. "Dispatch," I said, steadying my voice because that is a thing we do for each other. "I'm hearing a delayed transmission of my own voice over the open line." "Affirm," she said, and I could hear the low murmur of other call takers behind her, the way a center gets when everyone leans in without meaning to. "We're recording. Do you want a second unit?" "Negative. I'm okay for now." I paused. "How long is the delay?" "Approximately 90 seconds, she said. "It's variable. Now I'm hearing you say, 'I'll check the box again,' which you just said. There is a very particular kind of quiet you get when you realize you are standing inside a set of circumstances that will be hard to describe later. It's not fear. It's a kind of respect. I went back inside and stood in the doorway so that I could see the phone and the clock in the hallway that led to the rooms I had cleared. I set my light on the table, beamed down, a little cone of brightness like a candle. "Edward," I said again, like a friend starting over. "If you've been trying to call for help, you did the right thing. Help came. If there's something you need me to know, now would be the time." The floor settled. The heater wheezed. I could hear my own earlier movements coming through the open line, that slight delay. My boots on wood, my voice at the door. It was a loop only in the sense that it followed me. It did not anticipate. It echoed with a lag you could measure and not explain. A thought occurred to me then, something small and technical that had nothing to do with folklore and everything to do with phones. Old rotary lines keep voltage, even when service is cut. They can seize for 911. If a call is initiated and never properly disconnected, say, a handset knocks off its cradle and dangles it, can hold the line. If that line is in trouble, you get crosstalk, bleed, over from nearby lines, from inside wiring, from anything. That's the rational explanation. It was the one I wrote later. I walked to the wall phone and put my palm over the plastic. I pressed my ear to the handset without lifting it, just to feel like I was trying. Through the plastic and the distance, I thought I could hear another breath. Not mine. Not the house. A thin sound like an old man trying not to interrupt. "I'm going to hang up your phone," I said to the room. "We're going to clear the line, and if you need us, you can call back." I lifted the handset. It was lighter than it looked. I set it back on its hook with care. The tick of the clock swelled to fill the place where the line's phantom had been. My radio went calm. Dispatch was quiet for a count I could feel in my pulse. 12, she said. "We lost the line. No further calls." "Copy." I stood a moment longer, expecting something to object. Nothing did. I did the small things that make a report make sense. I wrote the time of arrival and the time the porch light came on. I photographed the demarc box and the phone with my work phone. I closed the front door and slid the chain, then went out the back and checked the lock twice. I stood in the yard and breathed the river cold into my lungs until my breath stopped, proving I was alive. On my way out to the cruiser, I saw tracks in the frost on the porch that weren't mine. Not footprints. That would be too simple. Just a blush of melted white where the heat of the bulb had been falling for some time on the same two boards. I told myself that was what I was seeing. I let myself believe it. Back in the car, I signed off scene. 12's clear, I said. No contact. Structure appears vacant and secure. We'll file an informational. Copy 12, dispatch said. For your information, the daughter asked me to tell you he had a clock like that his whole life. He wound it every night. You would be surprised how often people tell us things like that. They think they're talking to a system, not a person who will carry the image of a beige rotary and an old clock into other houses at other midnights. I thanked her. I pulled away slow. In the rear view, the porch light stayed on, a small sun in a yard that hadn't seen morning yet. Back at my desk, I wrote it up clean. I used phrases that don't make supervisors ask questions. Open line, no contact. Line possibly in trouble. Structure checked. No signs of forced entry. Phone service likely not fully disconnected. Dispatch heard line noise consistent with what did I put? Mechanical ticking. I did not write that I heard myself speaking from a minute behind. I did not write that the house had felt relieved. That's not something we put in CAD. I went back one day shift with a telco tech. He opened the box, ran his little tests, told me he couldn't explain why the line had seized and released like that. He shrugged. Old copper, he said, meaning old bones. Sometimes it sings. That night, months later, I was parked off the same road watching for a speeder who never came. In the empty time between the last song on the radio and the next ad for a diner that closes at 6, my shoulder mic clicked. No voice followed, just a little carrier wave. An accident of signal. Happens all the time. My thumb thumped the talk key by reflex. 12, I said, just to mark my presence. And in the porch light of memory, I heard a clock remember me, and I thought of a man who wound a spring and trusted it to keep the night. And I said to the air like someone still on the line, we heard you. Story number 2. I was a response officer in London when this happened, working nights out of a station that looks tired even in daylight. You learn the city differently after midnight. The estates go quiet in that held breath way. Foxes owning the pavements. Sirens filtering through concrete like water through old pipes. It was a drizzly midweek at 2:47 when Control put out a Grade 1 immediate on the air. Silent solution from a 999 call. No voice. Caller pressed 55. Advanced mobile location put it inside a high-rise that was supposed to be empty. Sierra 9. 1. Any unit to attend Ellison House, Broadmarsh Estate. Possible immediate risk. Silent solution confirmed. AML returns level 14, internal, near central core. I keyed up. Sierra 9. 1. Show us taking. 2 minutes out. My partner Mac glanced over from the driver's seat with that look we give each other when a job is all edges and no center. We'd both worked those towers, before Ellison House was in the middle of decant for demolition. Most of the flats sat behind steel doors, letterboxes sealed, windows socketed with plastic, utility risers locked. You still get calls, alarms, break-ins, kids getting into places because boundaries are a dare. Control came back. 9-1. Silent solution. Caller withheld. AML update shows device stationary at level 14 core or corridor. No callback possible. Site security are aware and waiting at the front entrance with keys. Received, I said, and felt the shoulders tighten that always tighten when you think, if someone pressed 55, they believed they couldn't talk. That route is supposed to catch the worst, the whispered emergencies in bathrooms while someone bangs on the door. It isn't the kind of thing that should come from a void property. We turned off the main road into the estate, and the light changed. Sodium lamps make everything the color of old tea. Ellison House stood in a T of concrete, 20 floors of damp and memory. Mesh fences and hoardings around the base had posters for the future development. Green squares and smiling children. Someone had spray-painted eyes over the smiles. The kind of joke you only half laugh at. The wind punched at the hoardings, so they clapped like hard hands. A high-vis figure stepped out of the entrance lobby and waved us down. "Evening, officers," he said, breath-fogging. "Colin, I'm the site guard. You're here for the 999? "That's us," I said. "PC Carter, this is PC McAllister. You got keys for the communal doors?" He held up a breathalyzer of key rings. "Every door in this place except the tenants and the cages. Power's mostly off. Emergency lighting only. Lifts are dead. We sign you in, then I can come up, or stand by, whatever you prefer." He led us into the lobby. The smell hit first old water and dust and a trace of bleach. There was a whiteboard by the door with a neat column. Officers' names, times, reason for entry. I wrote ours. In the corner, a stack of children's plastic chairs leaned against a mural of a river someone had painted. Blue, long, faded to gray. The lifts were taped off with a plastic band reading, "Out of service" in red. The floor indicator above them was blank. "Any squatters?" Mac asked, checking his torch and tugging at his vest. "Not lately," Colin said. "We had a couple trying it 3 weeks ago, but the contractors came through after and capped everything. I do my rounds. Mostly it's pigeons who found religion in here." Control crackled in, their voice softer in the way we all go quiet when we know we're being listened to. Sierra 9. 1. AML ping updated. Device still within Ellison, between levels 14 and 15, near the stair core. Silent. No background voices. We can faintly hear footsteps. Could be transmission artifact. "Received," I said. "We're going up. Patch us through on any audio you get." "Affirmative. Recording." We took the stairs. The emergency lights pressed a cold green on the concrete, the kind of lighting that makes you speak in whispers without meaning to. Our boots sounded bigger than we were. Each landing had a number stenciled on it in luminous paint. A little scuffed, but still bright enough. 4. 5. 6. At 6, something in the lift shaft made a sound like an exhale. I glanced at the doors as we passed. Steel shutters over the lifts. Dust gathered along the seam. On 10, I heard a voice say, "Doors opening." In the flat, feminine tone of every lift in the city, we all stopped. The sound was thin and far, like a recording played in another room. I looked at the dead indicator panels, the taped-off buttons with fingers of tape curling toward the floor. "Power's off to the cars," Colin said, whispering like the building was trying to sleep. "That's not possible." "Wind in the shaft?" Mac offered, but his face said he didn't believe it. We kept going. 11 was a blast of colder air. Somewhere a door was propped. We checked it. A fire door to a little service balcony was wedged open with a bit of timber. You always notice small bad habits. That wedge was a breath of oxygen for any fire that might try an old building like this on for size. I nudged the wood away with my boot and let the door close. The air stilled. On 13, the echo changed: more carpet in the corridor, more doors. The emergency lights showed a gauntlet of flats, each with the kind of steel door you could drive a car at. There were small notes clipped to some: meter access, contractor codes, the odd joke in pencil from someone who had worked too many hours in one stairwell. At a corner, chalk lines on the carpet made a hopscotch grid. It looked recent, the chalk still bright, no scuffing, no crust of dust over it. "Control, Sierra 9. 1, I said. "We're at level 13. Hopscotch on the floor. Doesn't look old. Any change on your AML?" "Affirmative," Control said. "Update shows device now above level 14, landing or corridor. No movement. Audio is." "I'm hearing a tone like you would with a lift. But that can't be right." Still no voice. We moved on. On 14, the corridor bent in a dogleg. The doors along the first stretch had big white stickers, "Void" in black block letters. Midway along, one door was different. No sticker. Letterbox taped but not sealed in that clean contractor way. The handle was the only dull metal not filmed with dust. I put my palm to the steel and found it colder than the rest. Not unusual, I told myself. Maybe the wind from a cracked window had been running through it all evening. "Colin," I said. "This one." He was already there with the keys, hands practiced. "Gerda key," he said. "Opens the lot." He found the right blade and slid it into the barrel. The lock turned with a click that echoed like a coin in a bucket. He looked at me to make the call. Under PACE, Section 17 allows us entry to save life or limb. A 999 silent solution with AML placing it at this level was enough. I nodded. Mac took one side. I took the other. "Police!" I called through the door. "If anyone's inside, call out." Nothing. The only answer was a rumble from deep in the building and the flutter of something metallic on a balcony somewhere. Colin stepped back, and I opened the door. The flat was a shell. Stripped carpet, walls noise, stained where pictures once were. Cold sat in it like a body. Our torches cleared out the dark in cones, cutting into an empty lounge with marks on the floor where furniture had sat for years. You can tell people by the spaces their things leave behind. There was a rectangle on the wall with 4 clean dots where a clock had hung. The kitchen, off the lounge, had cabinets with doors off. A strip of old wallpaper curling up from behind a plug socket like a tongue. The window was cracked open a thumb's width. It made a tiny whistle, a ghost complaining. "Police?" I called again. "If you've called 999 and can hear me, we're here. Can you call out?" From my radio, Control said, 9-1 AML. Still shows the device on or near you. I have very faint. It sounds like it could be a child's toy. Music? It's irregular. Recording. Mac went down the short hall to the bedrooms. I took the lounge, panned my torch across the skirting board. A small sticker was stuck tens of millimeters up the wall. A gold star someone had peeled melting plastic from a sheet. It had gathered dust around its edges like a halo. In the bedroom, I found the outline of a bed frame on the carpet, the headboard shadow like a tide line. On the window, there were small handprints in the condensation that had frozen in long fingers, more likely marks left yesteryear and reprinted by cold. I told myself that and believed it enough to move on. "Clear," Mac called softly, sticking his head back out. Nothing. Cupboards bare. A penny and an earring under the radiator. I looked down. There was a scuff on the hallway carpet like something heavy had been dragged recently. Could have been us. Could have been contractors. Could have been anything. "Control," I said. "We're inside flat 1404. No persons. We'll check the corridor. Wait one, Control said, and I heard typing in the background, the rhythmic stutter that means someone leaning in. Update shows altitude change. Device moving up. Level 15 now. Movement speed is slow. Possibly stairwell. We stepped back into the corridor. Colin resecured the flat behind us. At the end of the bend, the fire door to the stairwell was ajar by less than an inch. A white end stop had snapped and lay on the floor, kicked into a little pile of grit. Through the gap, air moved like breath through teeth. We went to it. Mac pushed it open and held, and we listened for that thing that isn't quite sound, a feeling that space isn't empty. The stairs up were the same as the stairs below, concrete handrail cold enough to stick a tongue to. We climbed, half a floor up. A little battery-powered nightlight someone had stuck to a wall months ago still burned a weak blue. It lit nothing but itself. On 15, the corridor was shorter, a T-shape with a window at the end, looking out toward the city. The rain smeared the view into a postcard you might toss. In the corner was a child's scooter, with one handlebar missing, leaned against the wall like it had been told to wait. It had a security sticker on it with the contractor's initials and a date 2 weeks old. "Hello?" I said, voice steady. "You pressed 55 on a 999 call. That means you need us. We're here." The silence didn't push back. If anything, it let us have the space to say what we were trained to say. "Control," I murmured. 15 clear so far. "You still reading?" A sound came from 3 doors down. A tinny chime like the first bar of a lullaby from a toy with failing batteries. 3 notes, and then stop. I moved toward it. Torch up. The door had a contractor sticker. Colin opened it for us. The hallway inside smelt like old washing powder. On the floor, chalk dust. In the lounge, nothing that would make that sound. In the bedroom, a strip of wallpaper had fallen and lay like a scarf. Then we heard the lift voice again, this time clear enough to turn heads. Doors closing. Not through the walls. Not from a flat. From the corridor. The lifts had no power. The indicator panels were dark, but the voice marched all the way through the floor like someone with a tannoy had spoken into the bones of the building. Mac met my eyes. "You hearing that on your BWV?" "Everything's on," I said. "We'll check later." "Control," I said over the radio, aware of my own breathing, the way it whispers in your ear under your cap. "We've got lift enunciation despite lifts being off. You getting that on your end?" "Affirmative," Control said, and the voice had gone from soft to paper thin. "We can hear it through the 999 line. And, update. Your device. Sorry. The device now reads moving up toward the roof level. There is no level 21, but it's showing altitude continuing up. Could be GPS drift. Could be barometer misread." "Copy," I said. "Because what else do you say when a call is climbing into a part of the building that isn't there?" There was one more set of stairs to the roof access. The door was a proper piece of work with a boxed-in lock. Colin made a face at his keys, then found a longer one and opened the casing. Nobody uses a roof for anything good at 2 in the morning, and no one ever writes that line down in an operational manual. The wind pressed through as we opened the door, a long, slow push that made every seam in our uniforms sigh. The roof was a rectangle of concrete with a low parapet. The city beyond was wet and moody, the red lights on cranes nodding like lighthouses. On the far corner stood a little plant room, door padlocked. A sitting gull looked at us like we were the ones out of place. I went to the parapet because something in me had to check. The edge was slick, the rain making the light run. You don't look down because of superstition. You look down to prove to yourself that your feet are where you think they are. My radio scratched. 9. 1. The line just... Something's different. The silent caller's line. There's wind now. I can hear wind. We all heard the same wind. It didn't mean anything, but it made the small hairs on my fingers stand. I did a slow circle of the roof. At the far parapet near the plant room, there was a little patch of drier concrete in a square where something had Saturday. The rain had taped an outline around it. In the square, a ring of lighter dust. Colin tapped my arm and pointed to the ground. A plastic drinks bottle had been wedged under the plant room door long enough to wear a groove in algae. If it had been holding the door earlier, it wasn't now. Control, I said. We're on the roof. No person seen. Describe your last AML? Altitude coincides with roof height, she said. And it stopped. We all went quiet without agreeing to. The wind moved in big drafts. There's a particular taste to roof air in London grit, and a bitter tang of diesel, even when no vehicles are visible. We stood a minute we couldn't justify, because sometimes you stand, and you let the empty make the next decision for you. Got something, Max said, and knelt by the parapet. There, against the upstand, sat a cheap brick of a mobile phone, the kind that lives forever on one charge. It was the sort that could call 999 from a locked screen, and you couldn't take the battery out without removing the back cover. The back cover was missing. Battery present. Screen dark. He picked it up with his gloves, thumbed the power. It buzzed miserably and lit, then died, then lit enough to flash a brand name. He didn't try again. We bagged it. Not because it was necessarily ours to seize, but because if someone pressed 55 on it, I wanted it to tell a story later. Control, I said. We've located a handset on the roof. We're bagging it. Can you tell if the 999 line has terminated? It ended 30 seconds ago, she said. And we've just had an admin call from telecoms. Sorry, hang on. They're saying the call came in with no SIM data. Standard for emergency calls. Nothing to identify the caller. One more thing. I shouldn't be able to tell you this, but I'm hearing the lift voice on the line again. Except you're on the roof. We're going back down, I said. We'll do a second sweep. The second sweep is always slower. Your eyes are used to the curve of the corridor. Your ears have mapped the way your boots sound. 15 again, then 14. The scooter hadn't moved. The chalk hopscotch sat in the same pattern, but there was a scuff on the last square, a toe print smudged through the number 8. We hadn't walked there. We hadn't touched it. That's the kind of detail you can argue about later with yourself and never win. At 14, the flat we'd opened was still empty in that full way. I stood in its lounge and went quiet. Sometimes you need to let your brain catch up with what your feet have done. Somewhere above us, muffled, the lift voice said, "Doors opening." I looked at the dead panel anyway. We called it after another 10 minutes. If someone had been hiding, they were either small and clever or not present. We resecured what we'd touched, took the phone, and made the slow descent with our breath fogging a small advance guard. Back in the lobby, I signed us out and wrote a little more legibly than normal. Colin shook his head at the lifts. "I don't get that. I've been here all week and they've been off. Power feeds pulled. Engineers took the cars down and parked them after a noise complaint." "What kind of noise?" I asked. He half smiled. "Complaints about the lifts moving when there was no one in them. People hear things. You know how it is. I do know how it is. Concrete plays tricks. Stairwells think they're instruments. They'll sing if you ask them the right way." Back in the car, we logged it clean. 9-1, state 5, I said. No trace of caller. Phone recovered. Building checked up to roof. No person seen. Possible malicious or misrouted. We'll submit intel and property. Received, Control said. For what it's worth, when you were on the roof, I could hear the wind and the lift voice at the same time. Could be crosstalk. Could be bad audio. "I'll bring the handset by," I said. "You can pair it with the tape." I wrote the report CAD entry neat, timestamps tight, no drama. Grade 1 silent solution. AML, indicated levels 14 to 15. Searched all relevant areas. Negative person found. One handset seized from roof to property store. I didn't put lift voice without power in the body of the report. I put it in notes so no one could say I was making a meal of it. I didn't write about the chalk hopscotch or the smudge on the 8. You pick your details. You try not to pick the ones that mean your sergeant will ask you if you're sleeping enough. 2 days later on Early's, I popped into Control with coffee for the operator who'd been on the line that night. She had the kind of face that does the job for years and doesn't break tired but kind. "You wanted to hear something?" she said, and put on a headset and one on me, run the 999 call back into the little private room they use for debriefs. It was mostly nothing, a long, careful nothing threaded with small sounds, our stairwell boots, wind, that toy chime, and yes, the lift voice. You could hear the Doors opening twice inside a minute, like a polite announcer who couldn't see there was no power to their stage. The last 10 seconds were wind, and one more sound that I recognized only because I'd spent so long listening to buildings, the little cluck of a maglock losing power. Someone had pulled a wedge from a door. Telecoms had no more for us. The phone went to property. Later, when someone in CID had a spare hour, they pulled it open and found no SIM, no owner data, 40% battery, last dialed 999. The call log gave a time. It matched ours, nothing else. No ghost number, no forwarding, no teenage prankster captured by a front-facing camera. Just a device capable of shouting for help on a network that is legally obliged to listen, shouting into the top of a tower being taken apart one floor at a time. Ellison House came down months after. The day before the machines moved in, I drove past on a late, because we do that. We haunt our own calls. The hoardings shuddered in a good wind, the posters hanging on by one corner of glue. I parked for a minute with the engine running because it felt like the right way to sit with a building that had cried out. In the silence between traffic, I heard, not from the roof or a shaft, but somewhere low in the concrete, that calm voice that has come with me on too many lift rides. Doors closing. I could write that it was the wind through something it shouldn't have been through. I could write that some power circuit had been left live. My body believed me when I told it that. It settled the hairs on my forearms and let my heart go back to its job. A week after the demolition, we got a 999 silent solution from the Broadmarsh estate. AML put it somewhere that didn't exist anymore. Level 14 of a building that had turned into a pile of rebar and dust. It lasted 12 seconds. It had wind on it, and 3 notes of a children's lullaby in that toy-thin way. The call ended with the sound of a door latching, crisp as a yes. I wrote that one up as a misroute. There's a tick box for it. The city keeps its secrets, and we keep ours. If you rang and pressed 55 that night, and you were someone scared and small with concrete for neighbors, I hope you felt the presence of 3 people climbing stairs for you, and a voice saying to keep hold of the line, because that's what we said into an empty that did not answer. We're here. We've got you. Stay on the line. Story number 3. I'm a senior constable, based out of a small 2-officer station in the top end. Out here, our patch is long blacktop, red dirt, and the kind of sky that lets you know how small a person is. Nights run quiet until they don't. Most of the time it's drunks from the roadhouse or a roo through a windscreen. Every so often we get a call that feels like the country itself cleared its throat and asked for attention. Just after 2300, comms came over the radio with a tone I've learned to sit up for. Not the standard CAD ding, but that slightly lower, measured way they use when something isn't routine. Catherine 412, any unit for a beacon activation. AMSA reports a 406 PLB triggered inland of Morton Creek, approximately 60 kilometers off the Stewart, east of mile 241. No associated vessel. Coordinates received with medium confidence. Police requested to attend for welfare. I keyed up. 42 copies. That's us, we'll take. Any more from AMSA? Affirmative. 42. Hex ID registered to 1. Malcolm Hart last updated 2018. Contact numbers listed are disconnected. Note from AMSA. A PERB was originally registered for a coastal vessel. This appears to be a personal locator beacon, hardware match unknown. They have secondary hits on 121.5 as intermittent. SES advised. I looked at the map book because phones are worthless that far out. Morton Creek is a scratch on a heavier scratch. One of those places you only know because you've seen its name on a faded sign. The cords put it near an old bore, and a set of yards no one uses anymore. I called my partner Flinny out of the back room. He grabbed his vest and the Yagi antenna we keep for just this kind of job. The DF kit is a blunt instrument, a little receiver that whines on the homing frequency, and a handheld antenna that lets you turn a beep into a direction. It's not high drama. It's a broom you wave until it knocks into something that's beeping. Comms 4-2, I said. We're rolling. Can you give SES a heads up to meet us at the old council depot? We'll convoy from there. And can you note, we'll be in a black spot most of the run. We'll call ops normal with times. Copy that 4-2. Logging you off grid. SES en route with one crew. AMSA asks you to monitor 121.5 when close. We pulled out into a night kept thin by a quarter moon. The bitumen held the heat like a memory and let it go in ragged breaths. Every few Ks, a roo startled and took 3 wrong steps before remembering its plan. We run our beams high and low out here so as not to blind each other, because there can be a wallaby written into any patch of dark. The radio went mostly quiet, just a score of static and the odd call sign from someone much closer to town. Flinny set the DF unit up on his bench seat, tuned the receiver, and clipped a little headphone to his ear. The SES truck was waiting like a square orange beetle by the depot fence, 2 volunteers in yellow shirts with that calm competence country crews bring. Terry, the crew leader, had a thermos, and the sort of grin that's really a brace for circumstances. "Evening, lads," he said. "Heard you've got a beeper singing in the scrub." "That's the mail," I said. "AMSA thinks it's somewhere around the old Morton yards. You still know the track in?" "Been a year, but I can find it," Terry said. "Dust'll be soft after the wind we've had. You got a sat phone?" "Yeah," I said, tapping the green case on the dash. "We'll call if we go out of radio and don't come back when we should." We went nose to tail off the highway. The track was 2 ruts and a decision. Grass rubbed the undercarriage with that scissoring sound. The country opened and closed like a curtain. Kookaburras laughed once, as if out of habit, and then thought better of it. Every now and then we'd stop so Terry could climb down and kick a patch of sand to see where the last tires had gone. Old cow sign, nothing fresh. At about 50 minutes in, comms calls are a thought, not a signal. You feel your hand go to the mic, and you make a note instead. We kept an ops normal schedule by sat phone every half hour. Comms. 4-2. We're on the Morton track. 30 minutes from last. Still en route. 2 persons. SES. 1 vehicle. Nothing further. They acknowledged and asked us to keep listening on 121.5. On the DF receiver, the beeps first came as a suggestion, a tiny tick under the static, then a real sound. 2 quick chirps every minute, old school and hungry. "There it is," Flinny said, like someone had come around the corner. He rotated the Yagi out the passenger window. The chirps were louder with the aerial pointed east. He brought it back and watched the needle wag. We crept, turned, listened. The beeps got fatter. The yards showed themselves as a collection of silhouettes we all recognized. A windmill with a tail feather cut like a shark's fin. A tank at the top of a steel stand. Some panels still standing, others fallen like cards. We stopped with the engines running while Flinny watched the DF meter. Terry and his offsider killed their lights, and we sat in dark so we could hear better. It's funny what takes over your senses when you're hunting a sound. You hear every cricket. You hear your own motor deciding down to idle. You hear a little bungee strap somewhere flicker against a bracket on the SES truck. Under and through those came the beacon's voice. Beep, beep. Nothing dramatic. Just a pulse that means I'm alive, and I would like to stay that way. We got out and the night put its hands on us. The top end can be loud in the day. At midnight it's measured. The windmill didn't squeal. It breathed. I held the torch down at my feet to keep my night vision and let the moon do its bit. Comms, 4-2 on sat, I said, plastic cold in my hand. We're at the Morton yards. DF tone increasing. Beginning foot search. Copy 4-2, comms said, voice flattened by the satellite. AMSA are still receiving 406 packets. If you locate, don't switch it off until we confirm receipt. We spread. Flinny swept the antenna like he was dusting a shelf. The beep fattened near the base of the tank stand, then thinned, then came back. He walked toward the windmill ladder, which of course someone had sensibly cut 10 years ago so kids wouldn't climb. The tank had a rust line around its belly like a ring. Something about the ring reminded me of a tide. Stronger up there, he said and pointed. The Yagi liked the height. We all looked at the missing ladder, as if hoping it might regret leaving. I walked the perimeter of the tank stand, tapping the legs with my torch. You can find a lot in the spray shadow of a tank: old filters, bolt tins, the lost parts of the last bloke's day. Against the leg closest to the bore head, tucked into a sort of accidental shelf made by a weld bead and dust, sat a little orange box with a black flip cover and a faded label. PLB. It was the size of a soap bar. It had been secured there with a strip of green electrical tape, twice around. Someone had done it tidily. "Here we go," I said, and pointed. Everyone exhaled like we hadn't realized we were holding it. "Do you want to keep it running until AMSA says they've got you?" Terry asked. "Yeah." "We'll tell them we have eyes," I said, dialing the sat phone again. "Comms, 4U2. We've got a PLB affixed to the tank stand at the Morton Yards. It's active. Can you advise AMSA?" "Affirmative," comms said. "AMSA advises hold activation until they confirm. They request hex ID if possible." I tilted the little box against my torch and read the engraved code. Comms repeated it back and said, "Stand by. Beep beep." It went on, polite in its persistence. "Who tapes a PLB to a tank?" Flinny asked, not expecting an answer. Terry shrugged. "Kids. Or a traveler who panicked. Or someone thought the signal would be better up high. I've seen stranger." The sat phone returned to life. 4-2, AMSA have confirmed receipt. You can now deactivate. I flipped the little cover, pressed the button, and felt that odd sense you get when a sound stops and you realize how much room it had been occupying in your head. The DF receiver went quiet too. No more little needle wagging in time with something that had never meant us any harm. We bagged the PLB. It had a tiny smear of dust in the edges of the label and a hairline crack across one corner, like it had been dropped once and then kept working out of stubbornness. The registration info comms read us didn't sit right. 4-2, AMSA, confirms devices associated by hex with a Malcolm Hart of Nightcliff. Note on file. Registrant deceased as of last year. Device status. Recorded as decommissioned in their system. They can't say why it's transmitting, but it is not uncommon for old beacons to still function if not disposed of properly. That explains some of it, not all. "Copy," I said. "We'll seize and bring in." We stood on the flat just long enough to let the sound of quiet recalibrate us. Then, clear as a bell and about 20 meters off to the east, the DF receiver made a noise like it was back from holiday. Beep. Beep. Soft. Then louder. Flinny froze. He hadn't turned anything on. He looked at me. I looked at the bagged beacon at my feet. "Is there a second one?" Terry asked. We were all thinking it. I put my hand to the bag and felt the shape. Nothing vibrated. The LED wasn't flashing. The Yagi sang a bit as Flinny pointed it toward the borehead. He took 3 steps that way and the chirp got brighter. He took 2 back and it faded. "Comms," I said, not thrilled with how my voice sounded in my own ear. "We've deactivated the PLB and bagged it. DF is still showing signal to our east. Can you check AMSA for any additional beacon? Static." The sat phone takes a breath sometimes to find its sky. When comms returned, they were cautious. 4-2, AMSA says they are still receiving packets. They are confident it's the same hex ID. They're also seeing a drift in the location of approximately 40 meters east of your first coordinates. They advise multipath can cause. The receiver cut across her with its little assertive call. We all moved together. Not because we meant to look like a line, but because night has a way of making teams act like teams. We went around the borehead. A dingo's footprints from earlier in the night had turned to shallow cups. There was a half-collapsed pump shed with old oil tins. The labels bleaching into paste. We let the Yagi decide. It wagged us left, then right, then left again in that frustrating way where you can always hear something but never quite see it. We found a second sound source. We didn't find a second beacon. On the back of the pump shed, fixed high under a bit of tin with one nail through plastic, was an old white box from a brand I remembered from a previous life. An aging farm RF transmitter that sends the tank level to a house receiver, so you don't run out of water unnoticed. It had a cheap little piezo buzzer on its face. The battery was long dead, but if you tapped the tin panel next to it with a finger, the buzz fluttered for half a heartbeat, the way some electronics hold a memory of charge. I tapped it again, and the DF receiver burped as if offended. "Bleed or bounce," Terry muttered. "Field's bouncing. Seen it with fence testers. Night plays tricks." We stood there tapping tin like children, while the DF unit made a liar out of each of us in turn. In the end, we did the sensible thing. We switched the receiver off, then on again, tuned carefully, and waited. Silence. There is a particular silence to remote that feels like a sound only you can hear. Comms, I said. We're no longer picking up 121.5 locally. If AMSA are still reading, advise. We've got one device secured. 4-2. AMSA reports intermittent only now. No new packets in the last minute. Your deactivation likely took a bit to cycle through. We did a slow circle of the yards anyway. Something small moved through spinifex 20 meters away and convinced us we were larger than we felt. We checked the pump shed properly, only spiders and a lizard that had lived 3 different summers written into its skin. We shone torches up the underside of the tank stand as far as our lights would go and found nothing but rust and quiet. On our way back to the vehicles, the windmill finally found its voice and made a long, low groan that sounded exactly like someone saying, "Oh," in a language older than any of us. We all laughed a little too quickly because we needed to. Terry signed the SES off with a nod. "You boys good?" "Yeah," I said. "We'll head back. Thanks for rolling." The drive out was slower because you don't leave a place like that without half looking over your shoulder. We kept our ops normal schedule. Just before we hit the bitumen, comms came up again on Saturday. 4-2, one more for your awareness. AMSA logged a short 406 burst right as you departed your coordinates. They say it may be residual or a test, but no timing, no actioning required. "Copy," I said. It had the feel of someone clearing their throat after you've said goodbye. Back at station, under fluorescent lights that make everything domestic, we did the property tags. I wiped red dust off the PLB with a damp cloth and turned it so the hex was clear in the log photo. The crack across the corner looked like a line someone had drawn deliberately. We wrote it all clean. 2,103.00 hours, PLB activation east of Morton Creek. Coordinates from AMSA. Located PLB, affixed to tank stand at disused yards. Device deactivated. After AMSA confirmation. SES attended. Secondary detection reported by DF kit, but no second device located. No persons found. Property to station for AMSA liaison. You learn to write the part that can be read in a week and still make sense. Then the one bit I didn't put in the main body because it would read as flourish. When we were at the tank stand, before I found the PLB, while the beeps were still polite and persistent, I thought only for a second, and I'll own that it could have been wind. And the way metal speaks, I thought I heard a word shaped out of the 2 beeps and the breath between them. Not a voice. A pattern, as if the country had borrowed the tool at hand and said, very quietly, "Here, I didn't write that. You wouldn't either." 2 days later, I got a call from comms off the main channel so we could talk like people. "You want to know something odd?" the operator said. AMSA rang. They got another single burst ping overnight from the Morton coordinates. Same hex ID, 30 seconds, then nothing. I told her where the PLB was now. Our property locker in the concrete room behind my desk, in a sealed bag, battery out, tagged with a zip tie the color of high OVs. We went and looked at it together like it might have a thought. Saturday. It didn't so much as twitch. We chalked it up to the sky doing what it does with old signals, to satellites catching a burp of code they'd missed, to the long, complicated story of how people talk to machines to make machines talk back. We'll talk about multipath and residual charge, and the way messages can pass twice if the world insists. That's all good, steady explanation. Good for supervisors. Good for sleep. But when I think of that night, I don't see satellites or hex codes. I see the square of the tank stand legs on the red ground. I hear the careful pleasantry of a beep that carries in it every person who has ever hoped someone was listening. I remember how quiet the country got after we shut it off, as if it had handed us something and was waiting to see if we'd look after it. People ask what scares us. It's not monsters. It's not the dark. It's the thought that someone might call and we won't find them because there's too much space and too many ways for a cry to get lost in it. That night, the call was a small plastic box that had outlived its paperwork. The night after, it was a little ghost of a packet that might have been a last sigh or a hiccup of maths. Either way, we went. We'll always go. Story number 4. I'm a prefectural police officer assigned to a coastal town in the Northeast. Nights here sound different than the city's winter sea on rock. The hum of vending machines at empty stations. One dog that barks at the same time every night, like a clock. We work out of a small substation. A Kuban on the main road with 2 bicycles in the vestibule and a patrol car that smells faintly of salt. It was January, a little after 1 in the morning, when the communications command center put a call on our car. The tone in the operator's voice made me sit up straighter, even before I heard the words. Unit 3. 110 open line from a payphone. No voice. Background audio suggests a station platform. Caller ID returns an NTT green phone. Inside Kamisaka Station. South entrance. Possible welfare. Can you check? 3 copies, I said, and my partner Mori was already pulling on his cap. The heater in the car clicked tiredly when he turned the key. We rolled out into a night of hard stars and air that smelled like the rope they use on fishing nets. Kamisaka Station is one of the unmanned ones on the single-track line that skirts the bay. During the day, the automatic gates chirp, and the little departure melodies make even old commuters walk in time. After last train, the shutters come down like a sigh, and the station goes back to being a building on a hill that remembers people. Dispatch came back as we turned up the road by the seawall. 3. Update. The open line persists. 3 minutes now. I can hear wait. Listen. There was a patch, and then through the thin compression you get over our radios, I heard a chime. Not an alarm, not a ringtone. 4 notes. The sort of short melody that announces a train that isn't there yet. After it, the metallic cough of a public address microphone being keyed, and a female voice, distant and formal, saying in Japanese, "Please, stand behind the yellow line." "Copy," I said, "because you have to say something." The station sat in its usual hush. Snow dusted along the steps like flour. The small lot was empty. We parked nose out, habit. The shutters at the ticket window were down, and the lights in the little concourse burned that tired fluorescent that makes everything look honest enough. The green payphone was exactly where dispatch said it would be, against the wall that faces the gates, its green body worn to a dull shine by 1,000 hands. The handset was on the cradle. The coin return was empty. Someone had left a little survey pencil tucked behind it months ago. I'd seen it before and ignored it. "Communications," I said into my shoulder mic. 3 is on scene. I have eyes on the payphone. Handset is on the hook. Platform clear from here. There was a click as the operator patched me in again. The same chime, the same announcement, as if it were being played next door. The payphone sat and allowed us to listen to its impossible. Mori looked at me like people do when the building is doing something they thought only people did. We stepped through the gate, our passes beeping as we held them to the dead sensors out of reflex. The platform had that varnished sheen new snow gets under platform lights. Our footprints wrote the first story on it. No one else had come this way since the last train had gone through. The departure board, powerless at night, showed a reflection of our lights. The loudspeakers above us were dead plastic flowers. Down the line, the crossing on the road winked its red lamps once and fell silent. I could hear the sea turning the stones below the wall. There was a poster on the platform for a local festival that had been postponed, and then postponed again. Someone had drawn a mask on the smiling cartoon fish with a marker. "Police," I called out the way we do in a station where a voice should never be an ambush. "You called 110. Are you here? Can you call out?" Nothing. The kind of nothing you get in a place made for waiting. I went back inside and stood at the payphone. The line indicator on the NTT unit was dark. The tiny LCD that would show the coin amount, if you were dialing, showed nothing. I lifted the handset. It had the weight you expect. The line gave me dial tone like a good soldier. I pressed the hook switch twice and put it to my ear again. The dial tone stood there, stubborn and domestic. "Communications," I said. "I'm holding the handset. Do you still have an open line from this number?" There was a pause while she received information from another screen. 3, negative. "The open line terminated 20 seconds ago, then hold, please. I'm getting a new open line call from a second payphone ID. Same line company. Tag returns as the green phone at Torisawa Station. That's 2 stops north." Mori looked at me and I saw in his face exactly the thought in mine. It's not far, but it's not around the corner. And nothing human walks that fast on a night like this. without leaving a hint. He was already back in the driver's seat, calling in. 3-3, relocating to Torisawa. The road between the stations threads the coast. Shadow on one side, the kind of black water on the other that takes light and hands it back colder. As we passed the first level crossing, the bells started up and the gates began to fall. Maury swore softly and checked the schedule pinned to the visor out of habit. There were no scheduled trains between 1 and 4. He looked down the line anyway. Nothing but the silver skin of rails and our headlights. The gate stopped halfway and shivered like they had changed their mind. The alarm cut off like a throat cleared. GR Control sometimes runs test cars, Maury said, mostly to settle the part of his brain that didn't love what had just happened. Communications, I said. Any information from JR on a movement? I'll check, the operator said. Stand by. Torisawa Station looked like Kamisaka's brother had moved one town uphill. Same small building, same lonely vending machine with one warm drink left. The green payphone was right of the door, set into a niche. The call had been open for 4 minutes by the time we arrived. The operator patched us again, and the sound of the platform returned. The melody here was different 2 notes repeated, cheerful in a way that felt almost rude to a platform at 1 in the morning. After it, a different woman's voice, a different recording. The local train bound for Shimori will arrive on platform 2. I went out to platform 2 on a discomfort so simple you could fold it up and put it in your pocket. A timetable said something would arrive, and my body was certain it would, because it had heard the song that always comes before a thing does. Our footprints printed on new snow again, no others. The heat from the building had barely reached the air out here. The snow on the bench backs had not melted. On the yellow tactile line by our toes, there were a series of shallow scalloped marks. Not prints the wind had cast little curls of drift, the kind that looked like fingerprints on glass. I watched one of them form and settle. It was a there is nothing here trick of light and weather. The sort I have learned to respect and not argue with. I checked the emergency call box on the platform's pillar. The door was shut, the phone inside cradled. Above, the speaker cones were a flock of black cups. I went back to the phone inside. Communications, I said. Any sign of who is on the line? Negative, she said. No voice. Same environment sounds. And this is odd. The timestamps between your 2 stations are almost exact to the day schedule interval for locals, offset by, well, by the fact that it's 1 in the morning. Copy, I said, rolling my shoulder as if I could physically dislodge the thought. The payphone in Torisawa gave us nothing more. We left it to its own responsibilities and drove on along the coast, because that is what you do when the line asks. The next open line appeared before we asked for it. 3, communications said. New open line. Not a payphone this time. JR lists it as an emergency wayside phone at Cannon Tunnel South Portal. No subscriber info on those. Platform noises. Wind. Please be advised the tunnel is currently closed for maintenance, no trains expected. Cannon Tunnel is a short bore through a stubborn headland that had been shedding rock for months. JR had put fences, signs, and one of those boards that show a cartoon worker bowing. The emergency phone is set into a small metal box on a post at the portal, so a driver or a worker can talk to the control room if they need to. At night in winter, under the sodium lights, the portal looked like a mouth that forgot to close. We pulled off into the service access, which crunched under us. The sign on the fence said in black on yellow, "No entry." We stayed on the legal side and put our lights on the post. The box was closed. A thin crust of snow had formed along the top lip and had not been disturbed. Our footprints were the first scars on the dusted ground. The rails cast lines of shadow that made you walk carefully even when there was nothing to step over. Communications, I said. On scene at Cannon Tunnel South. The emergency phone is closed. No track workers visible. No vehicle tracks. I still have audio, she said, and patched it. The wind came through, the exact same wind we were standing in. Under it, as if memory had turned into noise, I heard a fragment of the melody from Kamisaka, wrong and right all at once. The line clicked like a tiny relay was learning a new trick. I pressed my palm to the metal box. Cold went to bone. I thumbed the latch and opened it. The handset hung on its little hook properly. There were instructions in neat block script, for how to speak to control in case of emergency. My breath ran along the inside of the box and fogged, briefly proof that I had been there. I picked up the phone and put it to my ear. It was dead as a moon rock. I set it back exactly where I had found it. 3. Dispatch said, "Open line terminated." Another open line. The same ID has redialed. Then stopped. I could hear someone typing quickly. GR Control confirms no train movements. They have a record of a test announcement loop earlier in the day. They're asking if you want a maintainer dispatched. Negative for now. We'll do one more check and clear. We stood at the fence longer than we needed to. Out over the water, the light at the head of the breakwater swung its cone. The tunnel breathed the way winter stone breathes, a deep in the house temperature that doesn't care about your jacket. On the stanchion near the portal, someone had hung a laminated card with a prayer on it, the sort fishermen tuck into the visors of their trucks. I read it without meaning to, and the part of me that is a person rather than a list of procedures calmed a degree. We left it clean. We drove back through Torisawa and Kamisaka, because sometimes returning to a place proves something about you and the place both. At Kamisaka, I went back to the green phone and used it to call 110 myself. "Communications," I said when the operator picked up. "It's 3-3. This is a test from the station phone. Could you note the ID?" She laughed quietly into her hand, because we all understood the superstition of making an impossible thing. Behave by doing something ordinary with it. "Received 3-3. ID matches. Your voice is now the most normal thing I've heard all night. Thank you," I said and hung up. We looked for the kind of evidence that can be recorded in a report. Footprints, vehicle tracks, forced doors. We found ours and no one else's. On the platform bench at Torisawa, we found a small card under the armrest, caught in the ice. It was a Suica transit card, old design, and dead the balance would be long gone and the account would have lapsed. On the back was a name Sato, and a set of stations stamped in ink from years ago, the kind of thing a station staffer does with a flourish and a smile for a child passenger on a local special. I took it in and left a lost property slip with the card attached to it. Back in the car, I called communications and declared us clear. 3 is code 4, I said. No person found, no damage. Possible misdial or fault at NTT or Junior. We'll file an informational. Copy 3. For your information, JR Control says they're going to cycle the equipment at those stations tomorrow. They apologize for any inconvenience. One more thing, this is off the record, but I'll tell you because you brought us along. I pulled the old logs for those payphone IDs. Her voice flattened in the way it does when regular work brushes up against oddness. There was a series of 110 calls 2 years ago, around the same week. Same pattern. Kamisaka, then Torisawa, then Cannon Tunnel. Night hours. No voice. Platform audio. They ended after a day. Any person? I asked, though I already knew the shape of her answer. Negative. GR noted equipment checks. It reads like paperwork. We went back to the Kuban and wrote it like we write everything. Plain. Careful. Open line 110 calls originating from Kamisaka Station payphone and Torisawa Station payphone, and Wayside emergency phone at Cannon Tunnel South Portal. No voice online. Background audio consistent with station environment. Multiple site checks negative for persons in need or suspicious circumstances. No forced entry, no tracks, no damage. Reported to JR Control and NTT. No further action. That's how reports should read. Clean. The kind of language that would not make a family who reads it later feel like you had seen a ghost, and they had to live with the ghost as well. The part I didn't write is the part that keeps my hand still on the steering wheel at a red light on the coastal road sometimes. It's not a fear. It's a sense. Stations are machines built to regulate movement and time. They speak to us in melodies and tones, tell us where to stand, when to go, when to stop. In our town, on winter nights when the wind comes off the water, it sounded to me like the lines themselves were remembering being busy, practicing their announcements to a platform that wouldn't mind hearing them. A week later, I stopped at Kamisaka on a day shift to check in with the JR maintainer. He had his toolbox open, and the panel on the PA system down. Wires like neat veins. He said they'd found a fault in the timer that runs the departure melody cycle. Moisture maybe, temperature swing, old plastic. He said the emergency phone at Canon had a jacket off its cable, likely chewed by something small, and wind making the ends talk to each other can do strange things on a wire. He smiled the way a man smiles when his work is understanding the stubbornness of old equipment, and offered me a can of hot coffee from the machine. We stood on the platform and sipped and watched a proper train arrive on time to gather 3 high schoolers and an old man with a newspaper. On my way back to the car, the green payphone rang. They do that sometimes when a line is tested, an internal ring you hardly ever hear anymore. It rang once and stopped. I put my hand on the phone's plastic because my body wanted to prove to itself that it could be a normal object, warm under a hand in a winter station. There's a superstition among older officers here that if a 110 call comes in and there is no voice, you still say the same thing you would say if there were. You tell the line out loud that you are listening, you are on your way, and they should stay put and keep the line open if they can. It's not a procedure. It's a kindness to yourself as much as to anyone. That night, on 3 platforms in the cold, we said those words. They came back to me later as a little song from a speaker with dust on it that I could swear, just for a second, had listened back. Story number 5. I'm an RCMP constable posted to a coastal detachment in Newfoundland and Labrador. Our detachment sits by a harbor that looks calm most days and tries to scare you off the rest. Nights here have their own sound hydro lines singing in the wind, a buoy bell working its beat in the swell, dogs that know which vehicles are local and which aren't. On graveyards, it's mostly impaired drivers and domestic calls, a snowmobile gone astray, a moose too confident for its own good. The sea belongs to the Coast Guard, but the shoreline is ours, and sometimes the line between the two is thin enough you feel you're walking on it. It was February, -15 with wind, the kind of night when the snow on the shoulder is glass and the salt on your boots never really dries. I was halfway through a report when OCC, our Operational Communications Center, hit the tone on the radio that means they're about to add weight to your evening. Bravo 5-1. JRCC Halifax is patching through a marine distress. Digital selective calling on Channel 1. 6 originated within 5 nautical miles of your harbor entrance. No voice follow-up. They request shoreline checks for any visual flares, strobes, vessel lights. I keyed up. Bravo 5-1 copies. What's the MMSI in position? MMSI returns as 31602493. Position encoded near Gull Head, drifting southeast at 1 knot. No associated AIS. JRCC says it's a constant repeat DSC, automatic distress. They can't raise the vessel. Coast Guard cutter en route from B, ETA 50 minutes. Auxiliary paged. I wrote the MMSI on my notebook because it's a reflex. The number looked like all the others' Canadian flag, then a boat's identity, but I felt a pinch of familiarity I couldn't place. I looked out through the frosted glass at the harbor lights. The kind of night when anything out there would be fighting. Bravo 5-1 en route, I said, grabbing my parka and the small dry bag we keep in the cruiser for shoreline checks, binoculars, a handheld VHF, extra gloves. I told OCC I'd start at the south head and work clockwise, and if they lost me on the radio, I'd go to sat phone. The road to the headland is 2 lanes and a habit. The snowplow had left little walls on either side, and the wind shaved them into clean faces. House windows looked like lanterns behind curtains. A little further, the town gave way to scrub, and then rock that knows salt by taste. I parked nose out by the gravel pull-off just before the lighthouse road, and stepped into a wind that cut any sentence to 1 syllable. Bravo 5-1 on scene South Head, I said. No visual from shore. I'll go up to the light. There's an automated light at the point, a short tower with the sort of practical beauty that never shows up on postcards. The lantern winked its agreed pattern at the dark. I walked past the steel cabinet that handles the mechanics of keeping boats off rocks and put my elbows on the cold rail of the lookout where 100 locals had smoked 100 cigarettes watching weather in 100 seasons. The sea was working. Not angry exactly. Intent. My breath went sideways. I raised the binoculars and swept. Nothing that looked like a vessel where a vessel should be. No drip of red or white that might be navigation lights low on the horizon. No flare cresting the wind. No flick of a strobe. Farther out, I could make the loom of another headland. Between us, space that would not say yes or no. I put the handheld VHF on my shoulder. Mayday relay, Mayday relay. This is RCMP Bravo 5, 1 on scene South Head, responding to JRCC Halifax tasking. Any vessel in vicinity of Gull Head with visual on distress, come up on 1 to 6. White noise and the steady voice of the wind. Then, crackling as if pushed through cold wires, JRCC came on. Bravo 5-1, JRCC Halifax, distress, MMSI, 31602493. Repeat bursts every 4 minutes. No voice, no GPS sentence beyond initial. CCGS turn en route. We'd appreciate visual confirmation if any. Negative visual at this time, I said. I'll move east along the shore. I walked the path behind the light for a bit because the lay of the land lets you peer into coves from there. Ice had sculpted the rocks into a version of themselves. Down below, the bell buoy kept working like a heartbeat. I tasted salt on my teeth and thought of a story my grandfather told about fishermen listening for that bell on fog nights, how it was as good a friend as a person. I worked back to the cruiser. OCC came up again with a detail that stiffened the hair at the back of my neck, though it could have been the wind. Bravo 5-1, the MMSI returns to a vessel registered out of H, name on file. F, divided by V, Dorothy Ann. Vessel status in Transport Canada, shows struck from register, reported lost at sea 9 years ago. JRCC notes the MMSI may have been reprogrammed to another radio. Since, they cannot confirm. That was the pinch of familiarity. The Dorothy Ann went out and didn't come back. Everyone here still knows which pier spot used to be hers. You can lose a boat and not lose its name for a long time. Copy, I said, keeping my voice flat. Proceeding to East Hill and then the wharf. I took the long way around so I could look into every bite of coastline. My body had that jumpy energy it gets when there's a missing piece that matters. At the East Hill turnout, I stepped out again. The wind organized itself into lines across the sea. In between, darkness took a long drink and handed it back colder. I scanned again. Still nothing. The DSC distress bursts would keep going until someone told them not to, or the radio found another reason to stop. It's a digital scream that does not tire. By the time I got to the wharf, the volunteer fire beam had started to paint the key auxiliary crews readying their boat, shoulders hunched against the cold, those wool watch caps that could be uniforms if anyone tried to make them. I flashed lights and gave them a nod. Their coxswain, a man named Pete with a face the wind had worked on for years, jogged over to my window. JRCC rang us, he said. You seeing anything? Negative, I said. You heading out? As soon as engines are warm, he said. We'll go to the plot point and work a box. I'll keep the shore lit, I said. Call me if you get eyes. He slapped the frame of my door good luck and went back to his people. I pulled the cruiser out along the wharf edge and took the service road down to the old cannery. There's a slip there the kids use in summer to launch skiffs, and in winter it's just a mouthful of ice. An old fish shed still stands by it because nobody has had the heart to let it go. The padlock on the door hung open. Maybe someone forgot. Maybe someone was here. I clicked my torch on low and pushed the door. It went in with a smell of old rope and winter. The beam found coils of line, a stack of nets gone rigid with mold years ago, plastic totes with the corners broken off. On a shelf, a battery the size of a small dog in a plastic tray. Beside it, an old fixed-mount VHF radio wired to a stub antenna that poked through a hole in the tin roof. That rig had no business being powered, but someone, at some point, had cared enough to keep it company. Great, I said to the empty. I'll be the idiot who electrocutes himself in a fish shed. I put the back of my hand to the battery. Cold. I looked at the radio. It was a model I recognized from a decade ago, with a red DSC distress flap over a button and a tiny LCD screen with characters that looked like they'd had a long life. I checked the leads. The positive was clamped on hard. The negative had a bit of green on it, corrosion feathered out like moss. The power switch on the radio was in the on position. If there was voltage in the battery, not much of it had made the last mile. I leaned close. The screen looked dead. I touched the flap and then took my hand away. There was that feeling of stepping too close to a drop. Better to stand back. I keyed my shoulder mic. Bravo 5-1. I've located an unsecured fish shed at the old cannery. Inside, a VHF Marine set wired to a battery appears dead. Possible source of DSC, if someone else had power here earlier. No person present. I'll secure and move on. OCC answered. Copy. JRCC advises second DSC burst just received. Same MMSI. Position now slightly west, inconsistent with drift. CCGS. Turn is 15 minutes out. Auxiliary is off the pier. I watched the auxiliary's nav lights march out past the breakwater. 2 green dots shoved along by human will. That made me feel better. Because boats don't argue with wind the way people on shore do. I shut the fish shed door and put the padlock back through the hasp. It didn't latch. The shackle was bent. I pocketed it. There's a way to return it later and not write up a theft that isn't. Back at the cruiser, I put the heater on my hands and my head against the headrest and listened to the radio say things with authority that might never touch a human face. JRCC relayed search patterns. Commence sector search. 2-mile radius of last known position. Report any debris. Maintain guard on 1 to 6. The cutter turn called in more professional words that mean, we are moving toward your worry. The third burst came through a minute earlier than the 4-minute pattern we'd started to expect, which is the sort of thing that bothers anyone who listens professionally to patterns. JRCC's voice was calm. All stations, JRCC Halifax relaying DSC distress update, MMSI 316024993, bearing inconsistent, strength variable, no voice, unknown if false distress. All vessels keep clear of ice. Report any visual. Sometimes in the odd jobs I've had to do, the world will hand you a big obvious object to look at while something small and more important happens over here. I had the big obvious objects. Sea, wind, lights, a crew heading out. The small thing was in my left ear. Between radio transmissions, in that thin slice of quiet, I heard someone on 1 to 6 do the thing you do when you key a mic and change your mind. A breath. The quiet crackle of carrier. A click. Not words. A body on the other end of something. Station calling. Go ahead, I said into the handheld, because you always ask twice. Silence. Then the long-running, careful voice of a man reading coordinates with the precision of a machine. JRCC Halifax to all stations. Be advised. DSC distress may be spurious. We will continue to treat it as real until proven otherwise. The cutter's radar would do the seeing I couldn't. The auxiliary would see with their eyes. All I could do was walk the shore where someone could stumble. I went to the next cove over, climbed down to where the rack line had frozen into a kind of lace, and shone my torch along the seam between land and water. I was looking for anything. A cooler lid, a bit of plywood, a bucket, a life ring. A gull barked once in its sleep. Somewhere, a door hinge up in the dark made a complaint that had likely been waiting for an audience. My sat phone buzzed in my jacket. OCC. Bravo 5-1. Off radio. JRCC has a question. I called. The operator had that tone people get when they have to say a thing that's not their job to say. JRCC wants to confirm with you. Any chance the MMSI on that shed radio is the same as the distress? They've pulled the registry. The Dorothy Ann's MMSI was 316-02493. The entry went inactive when the vessel was lost. Sometimes numbers get reused if someone hacks a set. They're asking if you can get eyes on the radio's MMSI. I thought about breaking into a shed properly and taking apart a dead radio for a number that might give a dead answer. I thought about the old habit we have of not turning small things into big ones if there's a person waiting on the other side of town for us. I said, if the battery's dry, the set's a brick. I can bring it in after. For now, my priority is any person on the shore. Copy, she said. Relief. We all make bargains with ourselves. By the time I climbed back up, the auxiliary called AUX 1 to JRCC, negative visual at datum, commencing expanding square. The cutter. Turn copies. Me. Bravo 5-1 negative visual along shoreline from South Head to East Coves. Continuing north side checks. The next 4 minutes passed. No burst. Then 8. JRCC announced, "No further DSC received in last 10 minutes. We'll hold search pattern until 0200 and reassess." I went back to the headland. The lighthouse did its work without needing anyone to say it was doing its work. I rested the binoculars on the rail and let my arms stop arguing with the wind. It's odd. The things you think when the big ugly might have been a big lie or a small truth. I found myself thinking of the number of the Dorothy Ann. How numbers we assign to things don't go away just because we stop writing them down. My handheld hissed gently. A voice came on 1 to 6 so fast and thin I could have convinced myself it was nothing. A man's voice, not young, not old. Without the rhythm of panic or the theater of a prank. He said my town's name. He did not say it like a hail on the radio. He said it like someone reading a calendar aloud and stopping on a day. "Station calling, say again," I said, not moving. My thumb light on the transmit button because sometimes pressing too hard makes the thing happen less. "Say again." Nothing. Then the bell buoy hit a note perfectly in key with nothing at all. And the cutter called their next turn. And the world resumed. I stood there long enough to say out loud what I would write later. No further evidence of distress. At 0200, JRCC stood the search down with the gentleness of professionals who know they're leaving a question behind. The cutter steamed home. The auxiliary came in, their faces clean with wind and relief, and the tiredness that comes from having wanted to help and not being asked for anything definitive. I met them at the pier and shook hands and thanked them the way you thank people you might need tomorrow, or they might need you. I went back to the cannery and took the radio and the battery with me, because if I left them there, I'd be writing this story again in a week. In the detachment, under a light that makes everything look simple, I set the radio on my desk like it might answer a few inquiries. The battery's terminals were, as my eyes had said, coated in corrosion. The radio sticker had the model number and a place where an MMSI might once have been written in tiny pride. It wasn't. I peeled back the rubber flap on the front. Under it, the red distress button. I pushed it with my thumb, not hard. The way you press a bruise to see if it still hurts. The screen stayed blank. You can argue with romance by showing yourself a dead circuit. We wrote it up in the manner that lets everyone sleep. GRCC Halifax Relay DSC Distress. MMSI 316029493. Position near Gullhead. RCMP conducted shoreline checks. Negative visual. CCGS. Tern and Canadian Coast Guard Auxiliary conducted search. Negative results. Possible false distress from legacy equipment. 1 unsecured fish shed located. VHF radio and battery seized for safekeeping and follow-up. No further action. 2 days later, JRCC called OCC and OCC called me. Their tech had pulled the last 12 hours of DSC logs. He'd superimposed the coded position from the first burst with the second and third, and found something that would make for good bar talk if we did that sort of thing about this sort of work. The 3 points drew a triangle that matched, within the wideness of the sea, the 3 headlands that mark our harbor. That's not remarkable in itself. That's just a picture. The mention that stuck with me was this. There had been one more DSC burst in the middle of the night. A single chirp that didn't build into a full distress call. It had no position encoded. Only the MMSI. It had gone out on a schedule that matched the Dorothy Ann's EPIRB, back when that file was alive. A detail a good tech doesn't notice unless he used to fish. Ghosts on wires, he said on the phone. And then, hearing himself, bad cokes, a rusty ground, water in a connector. It happens. We see weird timings when the cold gets into masts. We'll blame weather. He was being kind to both of us. I sent the old radio to transport for destruction, because that's the tidy end you give to equipment that might make trouble after you've made enough of your own. The fish shed lock went back with a new shackle. I told the owner what we'd done, and he shrugged like men shrug when a machine has had its last say. Sometimes at night, when the wind picks up and the buoy is in a mood and my handheld is on the passenger seat while I eat a sandwich in a lay-by, I'll spin the knob to 1 to 6 and listen for a minute. Channel 16 in a small bay has its own personality tugs arguing politely with each other, weather reports delivered by a voice that sounds like it's been talking to boats since boats were planks, the odd nervous fish plant worker asking about ice. Every now and then the digital chirp of DSC puckers the air. Most times it's a test. Sometimes it's a real call that puts everyone in motion. Once in a while, you get an arrangement of beeps and silence that feels like someone has picked up a phone and is not sure what to say. I don't keep a shrine for this stuff. I don't say a prayer at the water. The work we do is about showing up, not about explaining what cannot be explained. The night with the Dorothy Ann's number was a night where we showed up for a call that might have been the long tail of a machine, and it also might have been a way for all of us who make a living answering to remember that we answer. The sea has its own way of keeping the roll. It doesn't need us for that. But if a number wakes up and forgets it can't speak anymore, and sends its small, stubborn call into the cold, I would like to think we'll keep listening and keep going to the headland to say, for the record, we are here. Story number 6. I was a response constable in South London, the year they tore the old estates down one block at a time and wrapped the rest in scaffolding. Nights suited me, rain on the windscreen, diesel on wet tarmac, radios doing that low electronic breathing when control isn't talking. You learn the shape of the city by the way light hangs over it at 2 in the morning, the way stairwells hum, the way bus stops carry conversations long after the last night bus goes by. At 2:11, Control assigned me an I-grade immediate silent 999 call. The CAD flashed Berwick Court, 19 floors off Albany Road, concrete and yellow brick with those dark windows that read as eyes. The call taker had typed, "Silent solution activated caller, pressed 55. Background, faint taps. Possible female whisper. Line still open. AML vertical reading suggests 13th floor." Rob and I were in the area car, blue lights bouncing off rain in little silent explosions. I acknowledged and asked for any history. Control came back, steady as a metronome. Previous calls from that block in the last quarter. 2 welfare checks, 1 noise complaint, 1 false alarm activated by building works. Housing says flats 130 to 149 decanted for refurbishment. Key holder. Lettings office, not 24/7, concierge off nights. We looked at each other. It wasn't a surprise. 999 silent solution is a weird one. People don't always know to press 55 when they can't talk. And sometimes they do it by mistake. Half the job is sorting faint information from faint people. It's a responsibility you feel in your stomach because an empty line can mean everything. We ran in quiet to the estate lights but no siren, because the roads were ours. The block stood there like it planned to be permanent. Lion's head plaques above doors from some earlier optimism. The front entry system was the newer kind. Bright blue screen, names scrolled as Flat 1, Flat 2, no concierge. The heavy door had a broken closer, so it thudded and stuck. Rain smelled like stone. Control talked us through updates as we kitted up. Line still open, caller not speaking. I have background noise now. Could be a telly far away. She, if it is a she, breathes and then stops, like she's holding it. She let that sit for a second. Advanced mobile location shows 13th floor, middle landing. Accuracy plus divided by -3 meters. If you work towers, you learn that 15 meters up or down is a lot of space. 3 meters is a landing and a half. We took the lift as far as it would go 14, but it shuddered at 12. Sat in its own head for a second, then relented. The doors opened onto a corridor with lights that came on a beat late, motion sensors that prefer debate. The smell was that warm metallic dry you get when the heating works better than the paint. The carpeting, the kind with flecks to hide the lives that happen on top of it, was stained in a shape that could have been anything. We stepped out. The lift doors closed behind us like lips making up their mind. Control from R Papa 12. Show us on the 13th corridor A. We'll knock through. I keep my voice even on purpose. Panic travels by radio better than anything. She acknowledged and added, almost as an aside, I'm hearing tap, tap, tap. Regular. Could be pipework. Could be a signal. The word signal hung there. You learn to avoid loaded words, but sometimes they use themselves. We worked both sides. The doors that faced inside flats decanted for refurbishment had the same notice. No entry contractors only. The fire exit had a chain on it, padlock hanging, but not done up. Somewhere a telly muttered the sound of people who didn't know we were listening. I banged the first door with my knuckles in the way that says, authority without threat. Police, can you come to the door? We're here to help. You say it friendly and clear. You give them the dignity of choice. No movement, Just the corridor breathing. Second door. Third. A woman a few doors down opened on a chain, hair wrapped in a scarf. Eyes wary and apologetic. "You lot all right?" she whispered. Because the corridor taught her to. We were. She hadn't called. She'd been sleeping with the telly on for company. We thanked her and moved on. "Control, can you confirm the vertical reading?" I asked. There was a pause while she coaxed something out of a system that is half magic and half very old practical string. Now showing exactly between 12 and 13. Z-coordinate wobbled. Still middle landing. Line open. No speech. I looked at Rob, and he looked at the staircase. We went down one flight. On the 12th, it was quieter. Lights hesitated, then decided it was worth the effort. A contractor had left a roll of blue plastic sheeting half unfurled, like they'd been raptured mid-job. Dust made shadows crisp. We knocked. We called out. Nothing. On the last door of the run, the one nearest the lift, a small thing had happened that I can't prove to you matters. Chips of paint that had fallen near the threshold were smeared across it, like a shoe had shuffled from the other side. It was a detail that felt like a coincidence, and felt like something else at the same time. We tried the handle. Solid. No signs of damage. Through the letterbox, the smell of new plaster. And cold. Rob put his torch through, swept it kitchen off to the right, hallway clear, a heap of floorboard boxes. No orange glow that would tell you occupants. No curtains. No radio. No person leaning just out of sight. "Control," I said quietly. "Can you attempt a call back one more time? Maybe we can hear it in the corridor." The trick sometimes works. A ring on the other side of a door is as good as a signature. She tried. The phone rang somewhere in the world, but not here. "One ring, then drop," she said. "She doesn't answer. Wait." You could hear her leaning into her own headset. "I've got a new background, a voice, very soft. Could be a child. I can't make it out. It's like it's close to the mic. I'll record." We stood in a corridor designed for efficient living and listened to silence like it was a person. In the lift shaft, cables made a faraway sea noise. On the landing above, someone moved a chair. It felt like we were late to a moment that had already decided itself. You don't force entry into a void property on a hunch, not even at 2 in the morning, not without a good reason you can explain later in writing. Section 17 gives you the keys when there's a threat to life. A silent 999 call presses on that line between suspicion and certainty. Rob glanced at the door numbers, and the building plan pinned to the wall, faded to the color of tea. "Decanted 130 to 149, yeah?" he said. "We're standing between 136 and 138. Where's 137? I held my torch beam steady over the map. On paper, it existed. A neat little rectangle between two thicker lines. On the corridor wall, there was a blank run of paint where a door used to be. We went up again, to 13. A boy in football shorts and a hoodie came out of a flat chewing cereal, clocked us, shrugged the shrug of someone who knows exactly what we are and exactly what we can't do, then padded back inside. On this landing, the regular tapping was clearer. Tap, tap, tap. It came from behind the walls, a radiator's eye view of us. I knocked on the nearest decanted door. The tapping paused. I knocked again, 3 times, same speed. The tapping answered. 3 times, a beat late, like an echo that had learned manners. Rob raised an eyebrow. "Pipework," he mouthed. I nodded. "Because anything else is ridiculous. It's surprising how much you can carry inside a word like pipework." Control came back in our ears with her voice half turned sideways like she was listening while she spoke. "Guys, I've played the last 30 seconds back. When you knocked, my open line picked it up. I've got your 3 knocks, then 3 knocks back. That could be my system picking up your radio through the console. Just flagging it. Radio bleed happens. Airwave does strange, polite things at night when you think it'll only carry one conversation at a time. It still made my scalp tighten like I'd just walked under a low ceiling. We could have left then. Plenty of times you do. But the call was still open. The AML was still painting a dot over our heads and then under our feet and then right with us, and the line had someone breathing in it. We called the on-call housing officer. He didn't pick up. We rang the number on the decant notice. It gave us a long ring, then a voicemail that explained office hours in a voice that had been professionally trained not to feel guilty. Rob looked at me and I looked at the chain on the fire door. We made the call between us, quietly, to take the responsibility we knew we'd be asked to justify later. "Control from R Papa 12, I said. "We have an immediate concern for welfare. Silent 999. Possible occupant inside decanted address. No key holder. Line still open. We're making entry under Section 17. The padlock, like a lot of things that look convincing, wasn't. The chain clinked like a sound effect. Inside was a stair to the service space that runs like a spine behind the flats. It smells like dust and heat and the sweet metallic of long-set concrete. Our torches cut the dark into slices. We followed the corridor to the dead space behind where 137 would be. And there was a door old fire service red under beige paint. One hinge newer than the others. A security seal hung in tatters. I pressed my gloved palm to it and felt the cold come back in my hand. I knocked. Nothing. I looked at Rob. He nodded. The enforcer isn't dramatic if you've used one enough. It's a tool that does one job and then wants to go back in the boot. One hit on the lock, one on the striker, and the door gave with a sound like a cough, trying not to disturb anyone. Inside was a version of every flat you've ever seen before the people give it a life. Bare walls. New sockets. A kitchen that had never boiled water. Dust patterns that told you where the builders had left their cups. My beam skated over a cordless phone handset on the kitchen counter, covered in fine white. The kind with buttons you could press through without looking. No base unit, no charging light. It didn't light up when I picked it up. No battery in the compartment. It sat heavy anyway. "Control," I said calmly. "We are inside a void flat behind the decant line. No one visible. Can you confirm line still open?" She said. "Affirmative. Background now is... Hang on. It sounds like... waves? Or static like a radio tuned between stations. I can hear you moving, but that might be mic bleed." We cleared the room's bedroom, lounge, small balcony with the city very definitely still out there, and the rain taking its time. No shoes at the threshold. No pictures on the sill. The bathroom had a protective blue plastic over the toilet seat like a hint of a joke. The mirror had a sheet over it to avoid paint flecks. Our torches made our faces into quick ghosts when we passed. In the lounge under the heater, a little pile of concrete dust had something drawn into it with a fingertip. It was a circle, and then a line, and then another little line. It could have been a doodle. It could have been a map. It could have been nothing. When we moved, the draft from our own boots blurred it, and that felt like a message too, even though it wasn't. "Control," Rob said, because his voice went gentler when he needed to. "If you can hear me on that open line, we're police. If you're in a stairwell or behind a door, can you tap again?" It felt strange speaking to someone you couldn't be sure wasn't just your own echo. Tap, tap, tap. From the wall behind the kitchen this time, softer, like the building was answering for the person who couldn't. We followed the sound into the service corridor again, the back of the flats where the pipes run and the lights are on sensors no one ever properly calibrated. The tapping settled down to silence as we got closer, like shyness. Rob put his hand to a panel and said, "Not to anyone we could see. We're going to stand here until you tell us you're okay." We stood. The building ticked the way buildings do after a day of being a building. Control's voice came softly in our ears. "The line's gone very quiet. I think I can hear the shipping forecast." There was a smile in her words because that's a very specific British middle-of-the-night thing to say. Or something like it. List of places, calm voice. Could be a radio near the phone. I pictured an old transistor on a windowsill. Someone keeping the night company with Lundy, Fastnet, Irish Sea, like prayers. It was comforting in a way that made my chest ache. "Rob?" I said. He nodded. "We're not going to find her, are we?" The her wasn't a person yet, not officially, but we both said her like we knew. In the end, all you can do is decide you have done enough. We left the flat as we found it minus a door we'd explain later. sealed the service door as best we could, wrote the paperwork with phrases we've both used before. No trace. No signs of disturbance. Entry made under Section 17 due to immediate concern. Scene secured. Control told us the open line had terminated 19 minutes in. On playback, you could hear our knocking, the corridor lights, relays clicking, our boots. The hush. In one part, there was a half-word hard to parse. Some people hear, leave. Some hear, please. I don't put stock in one ear over another. What I do put stock in is this. The AML data log that came to my inbox 2 days later for training. It showed our position as we moved between floors. The dot hopping in cartoon steps too clean to be reality. Altitude figures that read like a heart rate up, steady, down. Halfway through, for 3 seconds, it pinned to precisely where that blank stretch of wall had been on 12, the non-door. Then it joined us at 13. And then it winked out like someone had decided the story would end now. The housing officer rang back the next afternoon to complain about the door. I explained. He listened. The silence on his line was a budget meeting. He said, "We've had complaints from the 11th for months, knocking when the heating kicks in, pipework." He said it too, and that made it feel more real. He also said something he shouldn't have had to say, but did anyway. No one lives in 137. It's not a flat anymore. It was knocked through when they started ripping the run out. On paper, it's still on our list. In person, it's just a wall. We went back on a day shift with a different kind of tired, and let the caretaker with keys walk us round properly. The service door opened with less drama. Inside, the flat looked exactly like empty. The cordless handset had been moved to the windowsill. Sun came through and made the dust look like snow. The caretaker laughed when I asked about the radio. "Mate, we've not had an aerial on this block for 5 years," he said. "If they're hearing the weather, it's in their heads." He said it kindly, like he liked us. He showed us where the pipes knock when the thermostats misbehave. He showed us the blank run where a door used to be. He told us not to worry about the door we'd taken. He understood the difference between a problem and a worry. I still get the occasional roofer, night cabbie insomniac calling something in from Berwick Court. They hear knocking when the weather turns, or a ring without a phone, or the lift stopping on a floor they didn't ask for. You can build a city on that small, ordinary things refusing to be only one thing. We had one more silent 999 from the same block a month later. Same late hour. Same 55. AML this time, said 10th floor, and stayed there. When we knocked through and called and listened, a woman a few flats down opened on a chain and admitted quietly, "I'm the one who pressed it. I thought he was outside the door. I pressed 55 like they said on telly, but I got embarrassed when you knocked. There's no one." We made tea in mugs that had lived in that corridor longer than any of us. We wrote a vulnerable persons report. We didn't mention the night with the phone that had no battery, because what would that change for her? We just sat on the stairs with her until she felt the difference between the way the building sounds and the way fear sounds. If you're asking me if I believe the first call belonged to a person, I do. If you're asking me if it belonged to a place, I do that too. The truth in these jobs is often two things at once. My radio carries me around at night like a tide. Sometimes what it brings in is a clear shape. Sometimes it's a quiet voice choosing silence. Our job is to go and to listen long enough that we can live with what we didn't find. Story number 7. I was working nights in a Midwestern county, mostly farms stitched together by 2-lane blacktop and ditches deep enough to hold last winter. February. Hard frost, roadside cattails clicking in the wind. My unit was 2 F-31, a Crown Vic with a stubborn heater, and a radio that popped like a campfire. You learn the rhythms. Bar fights before midnight, domestic disputes around 1, then a stretch of nothing and everything all at once. At 0:14, dispatch toned me out for an open 911 line hang-up. WPH-2 hit showed a rural address off County 9, 1 mile east of an old feed mill. We get butt dials all the time. Protocol says we call back twice, then we send a unit. The callback rang into a dead hiss, then disconnected. The address in CAD was marked vacant. Utilities off. Foreclosure. I keyed up. 2 F-31 en route, 9 to 5. The dispatcher, Kelsey, quiet and steady like she is when she doesn't want to spook you. Came back. Copy 2F31. Additional note. Multiple prior calls. Similar. Last was 3 months ago. No answer on callback. I asked for a second unit. 2F45, Dawson, said he'd roll from the north. The ride out there took me past fields that remember a lake. The moon was bright enough that my headlights felt like overkill. I killed the radio music and let the road fill the car. Dispatch whispered in my ear again. 2F31, be advised, open line still active. Audible can't make out, just breathing, no background sounds. I asked, juvenile or adult? She hesitated, hard to tell. Whisper. Level. No words. My hand went to the spotlight out of habit. The heater finally decided to work and fogged my side window. The driveway was 2 ruts threading through frost-burned grass, a mailbox with a name half scraped off. I said my piece to the mic. 2F31, 10 to 23. The house sat with its shoulders slumped, an old farmhouse with an enclosed porch, one upstairs window like an eye that had forgotten how to blink. No lights, no vehicles. Dawson pulled in behind me a minute later, his tires crunching just out of sync with mine. We killed our cherries strobing on the trees and went to white light only. We always call out before we go in. Sheriff's office. You say it full, but not aggressive, like you're talking to someone who woke up startled. The echo came back thin, ate up in the rooms. We went to the porch. A wind chime made from teaspoons hung under the eave, knocking softly like someone indecisive. The front door wasn't locked. The wood had swollen and couldn't quite decide whether to shut or open. It chose us. Inside smelled like old magazines and dry wood. No fresh footprints in the dust on the floorboards. My beam caught old wallpaper curling at the seams, a beige pattern of strawberries that didn't know the seasons had moved on. Kitchen to the right. Living room straight ahead. The phone line, where it should have come through the wall, had been cut and capped. I remember that because I was looking for something to make this ordinary. A phone off the hook, a prank, a kid hiding. Dispatch 2F31, we're clearing ground floor. Kelsey said. Copy. Open line still up. Stand by. I think. Hang on. There was a pause, like she took her finger off the console just to listen with her own ears. I think I heard a whisper. Female voice. Could be a child. The hair on my arms did what it always does when the radio turns personal like that. Dawson looked at me and didn't have to say anything. We cleared methodical. Kitchen. Dead moths in the sink, a cupboard door that wouldn't quite close, a lunchbox with a cracked thermos inside. Living room. A couch frame without cushions. Dust on the arms like it had been brushed by someone's coat. The back door locked from the inside, chain latch engaged. A dry wreath hung on it anyway, a circle of brittle twigs that barely remembered being alive. Up or down? Dawson asked. Stairs up, basement down. Basements in these old places hold the kind of cold that makes you feel like you're breathing through a cloth. We chose up. Old stairs complain in a language all their own. Every third step hit a lower note. I kept my beam on the tread line. Careful. Patient. Halfway up, my body mic pressed against my vest snagged on the banister, and I heard my own breath in my ear. For a second, I thought it was the dispatch line coming through. It wasn't. The upstairs hallway had doors on either side, and a window at the end with frost feathering the corners. There was a faint smell of something floral, not present, just memory. I kept thinking, if someone called, they're scared. Scared sounds like whispers because you're trying not to carry sound through old walls. County Sheriff. I called again. If you called 911, we're here to help. Say hello. I didn't expect an answer, and I didn't get one. What I did hear was a ring. It was a landline ring, the old bell kind, not the digital chirp we're all used to. It didn't make sense. It came from the room on the left. Dawson glanced at me like he heard it too. Then we looked at the wall where a phone should hang. There was a plate there where a line had been, 2 little holes where screws used to be. The ring went off again, just one chime, and then nothing. We waited. You learn to listen to the space between the sounds. It stayed empty. We cleared the rooms. First room on the left, a twin bed frame, no mattress. A wooden dresser with 2 drawers gone. A third, stuck halfway. On top, a square of less faded wood where something had sat for years. A toy? A picture frame? The wallpaper up here was a different pattern. Tiny sailboats repeating, like someone had gotten a deal on too much of it. Second room. Closet with a sliding door that buckled when you touched it. A short string of plastic beads hung on a nail. Kelsey came back on. 2F31. The open line just had a whisper. I'm going to play it back. She fed the audio into our earphones. It's tinny when they do that. The console speaker picks up a lot of hiss. In between the static, there was a voice small enough to cup in your hands. Is he gone yet? That's what it sounded like. Breathy, not a sob, not panic, just careful. Dawson and I held still, like that would help us hear better. He mouthed. She said he? I nodded. I asked Kelsey. Call came from this address? She said. Phase 2 radius puts it inside your footprint. 8 meters. I tried callback, and it rings once, then drops. We went room to room like we were playing a losing hand. Careful anyway. No fresh impressions in the dust, no dragged lines. In the last room at the end of the hall, a window looked out at the yard. Moonlight turned it into a white square on the floor. There was a small, old phone on the floor by the baseboard, the kind with a toddler toy face on it, plastic eyes, a dial that didn't dial anything, a string long gone, no batteries. It couldn't ring. It looked like it should have, though, and that made my stomach do an old trick it learned in a dark locker room before games. A little jump, then still. I keyed up. Dispatch. Upstairs clear. No sign of anyone. Can you attempt rebid on the phase 2? Rebid tells the system to try again. To tighten the circle. Stand by, she said, fingers moving over keys I've never seen. A beat then. Rebid puts it, upstairs northeast corner. That's... She hesitated. Dawson checked his compass because we're old school. That's this room, he said. The toy phone stared up like it wanted to be picked up. We didn't touch it. Basement time. The drop in temperature hit me like a door, different air, older. My light picked out a single bulb you'd have to pull a chain to click, and no chain hanging. Stone walls, a spider that had built a cathedral between the water heater and a rafter. Something about the sound down there bothered me. Not a noise lack of it. Basements swallow the outside. You don't hear the wind. You hear your boots talk to the floor, and your gear talk to you. I said sheriff's office, again, and heard the room say it back in a smaller way. Kelsey, 2F31, open line now has faint mechanical noise. Could be interference. Wait. She stopped. That pause again. I think I heard your voice. That got my attention. Say again. Your voice, like your last transmission. Faint. Never mind. Could be bleed. Dawson and I looked at each other. We'd both heard weird bleed before scanner folks. Radio towers. The kind of stuff that makes techs shrug and call it overlap. We cleared the corners, the crawl space, the shelves with jars of a summer no one would taste again. Nothing. Nobody. On our way back up, I noticed marks on the inside of the basement door. Your mind wants to make them into something. Could have been moving furniture. Could have been careless paint scrapings. They were just marks. I told myself that twice, and moved on. We stepped back into the kitchen, and something small had shifted on the counter. I swear the lunchbox had been on its side, and now it was upright. Dawson didn't see it, and I didn't say anything because it might have been the angle, might have been my own shadow lying to me. We met eyes and didn't need the words. The house had that held breath quality like a bedtime story told under a blanket. I did one more call out, softer. If you called 911, we're going to step outside. If you still need us, say something now. The floorboards answered me with the old talkwood makes. Outside, the air felt cleaner in that immediate head-clearing way you get when you leave stale rooms. Frost looked like a million tiny opinions on the ground. Our breath came out like we'd been holding it for someone else. Dawson scanned the yard. Old tire swing. A barn that had tipped in on itself years ago. He said, "Was that toy phone up there when you walked in?" I said, "I think so." He shook his head like he'd already decided not to pursue whatever he just thought, and I didn't push him. "Dispatch, we're clear. No contact. Can you advise on the open line? Kelsey said. Open line terminated about 30 seconds ago. Partial whisper recorded. I'll tag it. I asked her to read it. She did. Is he gone yet? Then what might be? Shh. And then static. Dawson said, children in the area? Kelsey knew our county like a map glued to the inside of her eyelids. Closest residence is 3/4 of a mile. No kids on file. Vacant properties east and south. Want me to notify property owner? He lives 3 states away, according to the note. No need. We chalked it up to prank, haunt, audio bleed, pick your comfort. Back at the squad, we did what we always do. Paperwork in slow handwriting. Because there's no reason to hurry when there's nothing to control. I put in the narrative we're trained to write. Responded, checked, no contact, cleared. Dawson wrote his own, which would look the same but feel different where it counted. Our cars idled facing opposite directions like they didn't know the other existed. Before I pulled out, I heard a faint ring again. Not in the house, not in the car. Somewhere just past hearing, the kind of ring your brain makes after you've listened too hard. I glanced at Dawson and saw from the set of his jaw he heard it too. We left it. You have to, or you don't last. 3 weeks later, Kelsey emailed me a clip for training. She said it might help the rookies learn to listen for context. It was the audio from that open line, cleaned up by our tech guy. In the beginning, it was the hiss you expect, the sound of distance itself. Then my voice came through, unmistakable to me, calling, "Sheriff's office," from upstairs. The open line had recorded it like a room had ears. Right after my voice, there was a small intake of breath, and the whisper, "Is he gone yet?" Then a quieter voice I hadn't heard before, nearer to the microphone somehow, said, "Shh." The tech added a note. No phone number registered, just the 911 only flag the system gives to disconnected cells, pinging to that address with a confidence radius that changed 3 times. First 8 meters, then 13, then this is what stuck with me, 0. 0 meters is a bug. It shouldn't be able to tell you right here. The dot in the software centered on the house like a pin through a moth. I called the tech. He said, "Probably a bad read, man. Old towers out there. I'll mark it." The record stands with that 0 though, because records hold everything you give them. We went back one more time when spring softened the edges. It was daytime, a Saturday. The bank had posted a for sale sign. The spoon chimes had come apart in a storm. We walked the place with a different kind of light. Upstairs, the toy phone sat where it had, facing the door now instead of the window. Maybe a raccoon, maybe a breeze. In the drawer stuck halfway, I finally shook it free and found a postcard with a beach scene, addressed but never sent. The handwriting looked like someone who pressed too hard on the pen. It said, "We'll be there when we can. Keep the phone close." No name, no date. Not proof, not anything, just a piece of paper that could belong to any house. We never got a call from that address again after the property sold. That's the part that should let you relax. But if you pull up the CAD history for that road, like I did once when I couldn't sleep, you'll see 3 other open 911 lines within a half-mile over the years. Always late, always one whisper, always gone before we get there. The map looks like a constellation that never learned how to be a picture. If you ask me what I think, I'll give you the answer I give rookies when they ride along and hear something that doesn't fit the box. Our job is to show up and look. Sometimes the looking is the point. That night at the farmhouse, all I could do was walk slow, say we were there, and leave the door a little less closed behind me.